Hi, my name is Dorian, and this is You, Me, and the Industry, a podcast where I get to talk to people from the games industry and learn the difference between tonkatsu and tokusatsu. And what better person to teach me this difference than Mike Williams? Mike is the reviews editor at the video game website called US Gamer. This episode, we talk about how to moderate a big gaming forum in 2020 and what comics I should have been reading a long time ago. Furthermore, we also discuss the current state of reviews, how to come up with good interview questions, and we finally know the correct pronunciation of the word GIFs. Or was it GIFs? Anyway, here we go. Hello everyone, welcome to the show. Today I'm joined by none other than Mike Williams. Mike is a reviews editor at US Gamer, a lover of anime, tonkatsu, Assassin's Creed, comics, and just overall someone who knows how to pull off a great tie. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And I will say it's tokusatsu, although I do love tonkatsu as well.
Oh, it is tokusatsu. Oh, well, then let's just start off with this. Like, what is the difference between those two? I've never heard the tokusatsu, basically. What is that?
So, tonkatsu is the pork, the Japanese fried pork. Tokusatsu is Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. It's a Japanese term meaning, I believe, literally special effects, but it is that style of live action superheroes that are popular with kids in Japan, notably Super Sentai, which is translated over domestically as Power Rangers, but also Kamen Rider, which has been sort of gaining in popularity, and that's generally where my actual love lies. But also Ultraman and Godzilla count as tokusatsu genre productions.
Well, you never learn, you never stop learning anything about something new, I guess. Crazy, yeah. I think I saw it and I was like, wait a minute. I think this has to mean. It has to mean this, right? I don't know. So, yeah, I guess that's a great starting off point then. All right, yeah, great. Yeah, like I said, you're a reviews editor at US Gamer. So basically, can you tell us something about your job? What do you do over there at the US Gamer?
So basically, when games come in, I talk with our deputy editor and editor-in-chief about who's going to be reviewing what, exactly which games should we be covering for. We tend to do this about once a month. Which games we should be covering for the month, who's perfect for them, and what our review coverage plans are. When reviews come in, I also take a share of edits on them. And I tend to myself review a lot of the larger games because that's where my affinity lies.
Yeah, I noticed that you're a big fan of the adventure games, especially Assassin's Creed.
Oh yes, no, I'm a huge Assassin's Creed fan. Over on the bookshelf behind me, I have pretty much all of the games in a physical copy, but even the ones that are sort of on the lower end, like Assassin's Creed 3, I still enjoy. I enjoy them. Yeah, so it's a lot of never stop playing games and reviewing games. So once I finish a game, I tend to move right on to the next game. So I finished Ghost of Tsushima, and then I immediately jumped onto Death Stranding for PC, which we did not review. But I did write up impressions for the PC version. And then I don't actually have a game that I'm jumping on next for this month. But there's always updates, because I also cover MMOs, so there's always updates to that. I'll probably have to do some WoW Shadowlands stuff. But it's sort of a treadmill of playing games and writing about games that never stops.
Yeah, great. And yeah, before we get into these topics, you already touched upon some of those I wanted to ask about. But yeah, what we usually do here at the show is that we offer the guests that to bring their own topic to the show. Something maybe they want to get off their chest, something they played recently, a book or something. Is there something basically in your life that you want to talk about?
I'll go with Death Stranding PC. Actually,
Sure.
Ghost of Tsushima and Death Stranding PC back to back were both like I think The Last of Us Part 2 was sort of the big hit from Sony and the topic of a lot of conversation and discussion, whereas Ghost of Tsushima still has some of that, but at least for me, it was a more, like, as I read in the review, it's not a particularly innovative game, but it is the kind of game that I can just drop into and run around this sort of fake theme park Tsushima and kill a bunch of dudes and have fun. And I kind of needed that right now. And then the opposite side of that was Death Stranding on PC, which looks fantastic, especially if you have an NVIDIA RTX card. But also is sort of the slower, more methodical style of game where you, as Sam Bridges, spend a lot of time walking lonely stretches of road and mountain and grassland and whatever. And it's the kind of game that can leave you with your thoughts. So both of those back to back, sort of the game that I didn't really have to think about a lot, and the more calming experience that gives me time to think, were very enjoyable in very different reasons. And I have not actually played The Last of Us Part 2, mostly because I don't necessarily need more depressing stuff in my in my life at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just was like, nah, I'm good. I'm sure I'll play it because I enjoyed the first game, but it's not anywhere near term on my radar.
Okay. Yeah, do you think Ghost of Tsushima was kind of hurt by the release of Last of Us very, I don't know, a few weeks apart?
Yes, I do think that they should have reversed them. Put Ghost of Tsushima first and then The Last of Us Part 2. But I also think that there is probably going to be a hunger for that style of game that Ghost of Tsushima is. Just sort of a lighter, more gamey open world experience. I finished the entire thing in 62 hours. Like, when I say the entire, I mean like I did all the collectibles and all that jazz. So I think a lot of people are going to be looking for that style of game. And then also there's the people who, and I've written about this before in regards to Assassin's Creed, when they did Assassin's Creed Origins, they sort of shifted to a different style of game altogether, more RPG-centric. And that older, more straightforward action-adventure with no loot and all that was left behind. And there are a lot of people that loved that specific style of game. And I think Ghost of Tsushima will be that for them. So, like, as I've joked, we're getting 2 Assassin's Creed games this year.
Yeah, and speaking of Assassin's Creed, so let's say you could basically greenlight another sequel, basically, or let's say greenlight one follow-up, like what was it called, Brotherhood, I think. So what kind of sequel would you like? Would it be like to like Unity or Odyssey?
Oh man, that's a good question. Would I? Honestly, I'd probably go with Syndicate.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and there's a weird reason for this. For slight spoiler for anyone that hasn't played Syndicate, briefly in that game, there's a scene where you jump forward into one of the world wars.
Okay.
And I believe it's World War II. But you jump forward into a world war playing an assassin of that era. And otherwise, they have not touched upon... It was World War I. So otherwise, they have not touched upon anything past Syndicate in terms of timeline. I always think part of this is because they don't want to sort of step on or show the Venn diagram of Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs, which is very sort of close if you take the hacking side of the gameplay out of it. But I think that World War I mission was very interesting and very cool, and it was just such a small slice that I thought they were going to deliver more on it, maybe through DLC or something like that, but they never do.
Yeah, would be like a perfect fit, I guess.
Yeah. So that's probably, if I was doing a sequel, that's the one I would probably do.
Yeah, great choice. Yeah, let's start with this one then. So currently, what is the state of reviews in 2020? So we recently see a lot of harassment due to a bad score, but also harassment due to a good score. So it kind of feels like you can't make the right decision there. If you give a game a good score, then it says like, yeah, you're basically being paid off. If you give a game a bad score, you're being called a hater or something. So yeah, what is the current state of reviews?
I mean, a lot of that is just related to social media sort of bringing people closer. And as a reviewer myself, I really don't focus on it and pay too much mind to it. I do sort of jump into Era or Reddit and see discussions around the game. But rarely, like, if someone's like, oh, you're a shill, or oh, you just don't know how to play this genre of game, that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. And being a dude, I generally am free from the issues that tend to be a little bit worse in that regard, which is a lot of women who review games or write critically about games. Women, gay, trans writers tend to get a lot more hate and a lot more sustained hate and harassment.
Yeah.
That's more of a problem. The general, like, oh, you're a shill, or oh, you don't know how to play the game, or anything, that stuff just sort of like washes off your back. That's fine, because usually it's not like a concerted campaign of people that are trying to get on your case. Whereas if you're one of those other marginalized groups or women, that stuff can tend to be a kind of train that is kept going artificially by malcontents. I'll use the word malcontents.
Okay. Yeah, it also feels like people love to dogpile these days on reviewers and general people in the gaming industry.
Yeah, and we'll like, because if you are definitely that one outlier, everyone will sort of be coming your way. Probably the last one we had, I think, was Gears 5. Our reviewer, Hiran, was not a huge fan of. And there was a lot of, like, ire and people talking like, oh, you guys just don't like Xbox. You don't like you don't like Xbox. You really love Sony. And then like I would point out, say, like Forza Horizon 4 that I gave like a 5, I think, or 4.5.
Yeah.
You know, there are other games that we review highly. And then, of course, there's also the console warrior flip side, like, oh, they're not going to enjoy Last of Us Part 2 because they don't like any of the Sony stuff, at which point I'm like, well, here's Spider-Man and God of War, which both got very high scores. So, like, the one that they use in that example is our review of Horizon Zero Dawn, which at this point was 3 years ago? A long time ago.
Yeah.
And that's another case where our reviewer just did not particularly like that game. And in fact, most of the team doesn't like Horizon Zero Dawn except for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no. And that's also the kind of thing that sort of people need to keep in mind, is that a review is the voice of the publication, but it does not necessarily reflect the viewpoint of everyone at the publication. It's just
totally
the viewpoint of the person that was assigned to his review. And as long as it's not, like, as long as the facts are straight and they make a compelling and cogent argument why they feel the way they do, we will stand behind that review. Even if, like in the case of Horizon Zero Dawn, I enjoy it a good deal, but I still stand behind the review that we put up for it.
Yeah, that was always the case when I see like, oh, it's typical IGN stuff. They always give good reviews to people to the games, and I always think, but there's so many people working for IGN or some other site. Like I always care more about who like the person who writes the article or who reviews it, and not basically just saying, well, it's just IGN. So
yeah, and that's part of it, because like especially with something like we're a much smaller team, so we can't cover every game.
Yeah,
IGN will have the ones where they'll be like, well, how is this game a 5 out of 10, and this game is a 8 out of 10? Like, how can you even? And it's like, generally, those are probably different people that are doing those reviews.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's part of my feeling for a review is I don't need you to agree with me. I need to provide enough information about the game and the reasons I went the way I did on my scored review, in my case, but non-scored works just as well, that you can make an own decision. Like if I'm saying, hey, I was enjoying the combat, the frame rate is a little bit spotty, but that didn't bother me. You might, like any sort of dropped frames or anything like that, might really bug you. And so what the point there is, you can take that and go, oh no man, a fuzzy frame rate is gonna bug the hell out of me. So obviously that's I have a different take on that.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the thing. Like everyone has different feelings about what matters to them in regards to a game. For some, maybe they're more gameplay based. Some are maybe more story based. Some care about performance.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of variety to that overall experience.
Yeah, and we already touched upon discourse online, and you previously worked for very big forums, online discourse forums, and what are the lessons you learned from being a mod?
The lessons is that there's always a lot of loud people, and there's always a lot of disingenuous people, and you can run out the rope trying to sort of engage with the disingenuous people to a certain degree. Like, hey, we need to be open to having discussions about things where you and I may disagree. But past a certain point, especially with the disingenuous folks, I'm not changing your mind, you're not changing my mind, and life is too short. I have so many other things to do that it's really not even worth my time to continue to engage. And then there are some who you can tell over a pattern, when I was a mod, are just out there to poke the bear and aren't really adding anything to the discussion. And there's very little reason to keep that kind of person around because they just derail the discussion that could be had.
Yeah, and do you think that has become more difficult to moderate these forums through our time?
I wouldn't say it's more difficult. It's just a matter of being willing to step in and do it. Just to actually stake out a position and say, this is the line, and then cut those who cross the line.
Okay.
One of the things I used to have a problem with is people who would, like, I agree with even their argument, and I'm just like, yeah, I agree where you're coming from, but part of being on this forum is at least trying to fake civility for your fellow posters. So, like, you knew exactly when you stepped in, all Sturm und Drang, what was going to happen to you. So, like at least try. Yes, there are certain arguments and discussions that are not worth having in regards to like racism, sexism, homophobia, and that. And those can be taken care of again by mods that if the forums stand for something and know exactly where the line are. But as like a poster, just like don't get yourself got, because your statements aren't generally going to change their mind or put them in their place or anything like that.
Yeah, okay. And did being a barkeeper prepare you at all for the harshness of the internet?
No, being a bartender was fun. That was a good time. It's because usually when people come in, all they want is a drink with their friend, some food, and then to move on. So I enjoyed a lot. Mostly what bartending taught me is just meeting with people, talking with people, and also, as I brought up before, understanding when this is a situation that is just not going to get better. So you just need to go. Like, there are definite, like, bar patrons who come in and you're like, oh, you're already drunk or you're already belligerent. You just have to go. Like, there's no reason to try to give them leeway to not get themselves got. It's best just to get rid of them and move on with your life.
Are there any stories you want to share? Did you did something happen before there?
No stories in particular. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah. So it was a brewery that I worked at, but it was a brewery in a mall. So it wasn't like a hard bar or anything like that. So,
okay.
It's less of a situation where there's like a real rough patrons coming in, because it's like next to Chili's or something like that. It's rare that it's going to be really a problem.
Okay. On the topic of reviews, do you think there's something such as crunch culture in reviews?
Yeah. I mean, just depending on the game, yeah. I had GTA 5. They gave it to us probably like a week before embargo. So I was doing probably like 11, 12-hour days of playing in order to get that done for a review. And I think Kotaku has started addressing some of this by either paying people or allowing them to have days off after they've reviewed games. But a lot of it, in terms of review, is, from 9 to 5. Within that 9 to 5, quote unquote, I have to write something, which is probably a couple hours, because I usually have to have at least something each day, but that also doesn't count news stories which need to be done. And also have to play games. So generally what ends up happening is game playing time bleeds into the after hours.
Oh, okay.
And yes, that can be fine, especially if you're really vibing or enjoying a game, but that's not always the case. Like, you don't always get the games that you want to play, and the games that you want to play don't always turn out how you think that they're going to. So, like, everyone who thinks it's like, oh, it's a great job, like, it is a lot of fun. But, like, imagine if you got a game and you started playing it, and everyone probably got, like, a game that they started playing, and they're like, oh, I'm not feeling this. For most people, they would just stop playing the game. I don't get that option if I'm slated to review it or we need to cover it. Like, I have to keep playing. So that can be, like, 20, 30 plus hours on a game that you don't enjoy. Like, I did Fallout 76 and Anthem back to back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's two games that I didn't enjoy, but I had to keep playing because in order to do a proper review, I had to know the full scope of each game. So yeah, so those are the kinds of games, and especially like that time is a lot of playing games outside of the 9 to 5, which when you start adding it up, it's a lot of long hours spent playing games and if you counted those hours at your salary, then your dollar per hour amount is going way down.
Yeah, I can see that. And yeah, this is also related. So, what does your review setup look like? Do you have a notepad, or do you use a laptop, or do you write while you play, or do you take notes all the time?
So I used to do notes. Now what I have is I have shadow play. So when I play a game, I record everything.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
So I have shadow play for PC games, and then I have an Elgato for console games. And I have one drive that is just uh, 2 terabytes of space that is just set aside for videos. And that is how I go back and check like particular feelings, like, oh man, I feel like this was like a real quick section of game. And then I can go back and actually scrub through that video and see what the experience I was actually having. Or I remember specific moments and I'll mark down like, hey, this would happen in this particular video. So you'll find it like 20 minutes or something in. And it also helps me know exactly how long I spent playing a game, because I can just drag. I usually drag all of the footage into VLC player, and in one playlist it'll tell you how long the videos add up to, and that's how I know how long I've played a game.
Mm-hmm.
So video for me helps a lot, which is also weird because US Gamer does not do a lot of video stuff. So it's not like my video footage tends to get used for like our YouTube channel or anything like that, because we're not big enough to have a video team or be really video centric or have a full-time video editor to cut all that stuff.
And do you have any snacks that you prefer while playing?
Well, I've always worked from home, so it's not like a thing of snacks, because I'm like eating at my desk. Like right now, I have a large Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee.
Oh, okay.
Like we're talking right now, I'm at my desk
Mm-hmm.
that I work and play games at, and so any food I have, I'll do coffee and Red Bull are pretty much my big. I've been trying to get away from candy. If I did candy, it was Sour Patch Kids, but the mix of snacking on candy and sitting in one place, playing games or writing, does not necessarily mix for general health.
Yeah, I actually hope that you didn't drink any Red Bull while playing Death Stranding, because we all know the gamer juice is Monster Energy.
It is, and it looks super clear in on the PC version. But see, I don't like Monster Energy.
Oh, really?
No. I will do the Mountain Dew energy drink.
Okay.
Because they're cheap. I can get those at my local store for like one for $1.
Mm-hmm.
But Red Bull sugar free is my energy drink of choice.
And, okay, we already touched upon this, but the entire process of starting a review, playing the game, and then ending up with the final written review. Can you take us through the entire process? You already mentioned it's playing and then watching the footage, but maybe you can go more into detail.
Yeah, so basically get the game. Used to be back in the day, sometimes the game would get shipped. Now it's mostly codes. I'll start playing the game. Sometimes you might come up with an angle, because really the part of the written review that matters is an angle, a thrust of where the review, what the review is trying to say. And usually that'll come up mentally while I'm playing the game. So I may make a note here or there if I find a scene that particularly hits on that angle. But for the most part, I just play straight through. Then once I'm done, I sit down and I do a first draft. Usually my first draft is throwing up all of my thoughts onto a page. then sort of hammering that together into something coherent with a general thrust. And then I hand it to one of the other editors we have, and I tell them to hack and slash. I tend to write overly long. So hack and slash is like, please like cut down where you don't think this matters to the overall thrust of the review. And usually by that point, we have not scored it. Usually score tends to happen after we finish the review, and whoever's writing the review will either say, what do you, the editor, think this score is from what you've read? And or I think this is a 3 out of 5, or I think it's a 4 out of 5. And occasionally, sometimes we'll have a little discussion where, say, the reviewer will write something and say, I think this is a 4 out of 5. Like, that's what my gut tells me. And then the editor will be like, well, you know, if it's supposed to be a 4 out of 5, I don't think you've really justified that in the text. I don't think you've addressed enough positives. If it's a 2 out of 5 or lower, like, maybe you didn't address enough negatives to justify that score. So you need to go back and hit that if you feel really strongly about that as a point. And that's usually how we come to the score. And then probably another quick edit. I pull all of my screenshots from the footage. So I will go back through the footage and take my time going through it and pulling screenshots of good moments and stuff like that. And then that's all the screenshots that go into the review itself. We'll drop it in the CMS with the screenshots and everything. We do one last pass, and then we schedule it to go up on the site. Usually with the reviews, there's a particular embargo date that we have to hit. So that's... And generally, for most sites, reviews post-embargo drop off in terms of traffic very quickly. So you usually want to hit that embargo date in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the big fat check comes, and then you drive off in your Tesla, right?
I wish. Yeah, man. Yeah, no. I do wish it paid more. Trust me, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, but speaking of hitting those dates, what are the things that a video game reviewer dreads? So you basically also touched upon this with the crazy embargoes and maybe the review dates. You get the game on Friday and you have to deliver the review on Monday. It's always a great thing, I heard. Are there any like really, really crazy NDA restrictions you have encountered in your life as a review editor?
Generally most of them. So my first like real hard one was Batman Arkham Knight, where they were like, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about this. Like, I think the big one there, of course, was you can't talk about who the Arkham Knight was, you can't hint at it. You can't talk about the game beyond a certain point, which is generally the way that a lot of story-based ones, like The Last of Us Part 2, Sony did not let us talk about the story beyond a certain point.
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of embargoes that are understandable from a community player culture side, because spoilers are such a and I detest spoilers. That's probably the other thing that I got from modding. I detest spoiler culture as a whole. So because I find, and this is important for games, like when you're reviewing a game that is so focused on story and themes, you blunt criticism, good or bad, if you make it impossible to talk about that story and themes all the way through. So as a good example, around the same time as The Last of Us Part 2, Netflix launched Spike Lee's Da 5 Bloods. And not only were critics able to talk about the full scope of that film from beginning to end, like there isn't a problem there. That's seen as normal. And in fact, Netflix has a Twitter account that I called out positively, where they go and find specific critics to talk about their films openly from beginning to end, because that's what criticism is. And I think, and there was a big to-do about it, about The Last of Us Part 2, like preventing critics from saying, like, you can't talk about the game past a certain point, just makes it unnecessarily obtuse or impossible to talk about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, when I was modding, my rule was, like, once it's out, like, don't spoil it beforehand or anything like that. But once it's out, it's out. And it's up to you to just not be a part of this discussion if you want to go into it fresh. So I think that's the kind of, and I follow a lot of movie and TV stuff. And that's why I'm very much on the mindset of, screw spoilers. Once it's out, it's up to you to stay away from it if you need to go in fresh. I understand not everyone gets to see a thing in day of. I'm sympathetic to that. But in terms of everyone else being able to actually discuss the thing in front of them, yeah, I prefer to be open and honest about things.
Yeah, and speaking of comics and movies, let's maybe jump in and do a little side thingy here and ask about what you have written on Twitter. You spoke on Twitter about the novelization of Revenge of the Sith and it being a truly great Star Wars story. And I wanted to know, since I've never heard about this before, I wanted to know, does it replace the, let's say, I would just say the bad movie, or does it basically build upon it?
It builds upon it. It's written so well. And the guy who wrote it is Matthew Woodring Stover. And he's one of my favorite authors in terms of prose. Just like every word and sentence he puts down is just fantastic and to the point and so colorful. And that they tapped him to do the Revenge of the Sith novelization makes me so happy. He also did 2 other Star Wars books, New Jedi Order Traitor, which is probably one of my favorite Star Wars books, period, and then Shatterpoint, which is a novel about Mace Windu. And both of those are also great. But Revenge of the Sith in particular, like there's the idea of Revenge of the Sith is fine, but when you can color in those sections, and I think if you look at Star Wars, The Clone Wars, the show, it's probably one of the best Star Wars things, period, because they have time to spend on characterization and arcs and themes in a way that the movies can't quite do in a 2.5-hour runtime or however long they are. And so the novelization, I think, really fills in characterization of Obi-Wan and Anakin in terms of, I feel like where the movies miss out is you don't really feel their friendship, their bond, outside of just the normal action movie. Here's some quips, maybe some talking, and then it all comes to blows. As opposed to Clone Wars and the novelization, where you sort of get a little bit more time to understand the bond between these 2 characters.
Yeah, and you also mentioned comics, and I recently started getting into comics very, very slowly.
Did you? Excellent.
But I'm from Germany, and I would just say it like this: comics have not been this big in Germany, I would say. Also, I mean, we have had the cartoons, the X-Men cartoon, and I think, me in particular grew up with anime, so I was always more leaning on the anime side, so not really comics. But I recently got into Miss Marvel. I got the omnibus of her comic, and I recently purchased the Hawkeye omnibus from Matt Taylor. I think, is it Matt Taylor?
Oh, that's good.
Matt Fraction.
Matt Fraction.
Matt Fraction, right? Since I'm not that into Hawkeye as a character from the MCU, but I always thought, let's just give it a try, since everybody claims that this is one of the best comics out there. So I
will say also you should pick up. I don't know if they have an Omni yet for the first half of the story, but Immortal Hulk by Al Ewing is fantastic. It's just every now and then Hawkeye is one of those takes. You get a creator that comes along and does such a fantastic, unique take on a character, and Immortal Hulk is one of those books. And it looks like they might have, so they did release an paperback omnibus. I don't know if they have a hardcover one yet.
Oh, okay.
Of the Immortal Hulk. And that's just a fantastic horror story. Like, it starts off very horror-esque, and then sort of dives into the nature of power and who wields it. And that's going to be, they've just announced that it's going to end at issue 50. So eventually that'll probably be a good 2 hardcover omnibuses to get the entire story.
Okay.
In the same way that Hawkeye is a single omnibus. Miss Marvel is an ongoing thing. Probably the latest run of Miles Morales I really enjoy. But yeah, I love comics. Also, if you're going headier, try Mr. Miracle by Tom King. That's also a very good done-in-one run, and he's currently doing Strange Adventures. And they just announced today that he's going to be doing a 12-issue maxi series about Watchmen's Rorschach.
Oh, okay.
So...
yeah, I also heard the Watchmen comic is infamously awesome.
Yes, the original Watchmen is infamously awesome, and against all odds, the Watchmen HBO show is also fantastic. So I'm looking forward to it. Tom King is very well loved. He is hit or miss for me. I tend to find he just finished a Batman run. I did not particularly enjoy his Batman.
Oh, okay.
But his done-in-one stuff, Omega Man, Mr. Miracle, Vision, all that was great. So I'm 50-50 on Rorschach. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the thing for me with comics is it's very similar to me like with TV shows. I usually don't want to see them if they're not finished, since I've got burnt by Lost, the TV show. I always want to wait before it's completed, because sometimes it gets cancelled. Sometimes maybe the director or the creator, jumps off the project basically. So is there I know you also recommended I think it's called Cobra Round 1 and the Wicked and the Divine. Are those finished, or do you have any recommendations for a finished series besides the one you already told us?
The Wicked and Divine just finished.
Okay, and would you recommend
the Wicked
it?
and Divine is done. I would recommend
it. Okay.
It's going to be a bunch of graphic novels, but it's worth it. I'm the same way, and that's part of the reason I enjoy. To jump back to Tokusatsu, I enjoy Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, and Gundam over on the anime side, because the way that those long-running franchises work is they do a year of story. So every year, Kamen Rider there's a new writer, and it's a completely new, mostly unrelated story from previous ones, and they do the entire year of that character, and then the story is done. And not every year is good, but it's a complete story. So, and Gundam is the same way. Gundam, you'll get, here's 52 episodes, that is one story. Maybe they'll do sequels, but that's rare. And it's just a single take on this specific idea. And I actually wish American comics would play with that more. Like they just did Chip Zdarsky did Spider-Man Life Story, which is essentially Chip taking Spider-Man from his 60s origin onward, assuming that he aged in real time. And that was a fantastic story because it's a done in one. Like, it's from the beginning to the death of Peter Parker, and it's done, and they're not going to revisit it. It's just a good, solid story that you can buy in graphic novel, and you're good. And I wish that comics would play with that a little bit more, like saying, like, the used to be Elseworlds. Like, hey, what happens if you just hand a great creative team Batman and don't bother them? Just say, tell a complete story about your version of Batman, and that's it. They've had some of that actually with Batman White Knight, which I didn't particularly like, but that's the kind of I believe it's fairly popular. So that's the kind of story that you can get out of that. Just letting a creative team play around with it, as opposed to being shackled to continuity, which I'm fine with continuity. I'm a comic reader, so that's kind of my thing. But having room to play around, I also enjoy.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe we can jump back to the topic of journalism. And I know this might be a very harsh contrast, but yeah, with like the recent events, and I think we can all do better in terms of I think diversity and representation. And I wanted to know, since with all the Black Lives Matter things happening around the world and also in the games industry, I wanted to know. I saw this thread, I think, by Blessing Adeoye, and he was talking about being black in the games industry and particularly in journalism. So can you say something about being black in games journalism? Do you feel that there's something like a form of racism in there?
I don't particularly. I've never felt it personally, but I also came up in a time, I've been doing this nearly 10 years at this point, where I was one of 2 or 3 people who was black in games journalism. And I actually had a couple of times where I was confused for Evan Narcisse, who was at Kotaku. Now he's, I don't know if he's still at IO9. He might be editor-at-large at IO9, but he's also moved on to writing other things. Like in the games industry and in comics and whatnot. So, I mean, that's definitely one of those moments where it's technically racism that you think Evan and I are the same person, because we really don't look alike other than the fact that we're both black dudes who wear glasses. But I've never run into a spot where I thought it's a negative for me. Again, that's another one of those situations where I think I'm a black dude, and I think the dude sometimes overwrites the black part in terms of being shut out of places or whatnot, or the assumptions that are made about me. Whereas I think probably a journalist who is a woman or who is trans has to deal with some more issues just in the line of their job of covering games, of being at game events and whatnot. So for me, like, generally at US Gamer, I have the ability to opt in or opt out of having specific conversations. So if there is a situation around blackness in the gaming industry or games journalism, I've been around long enough and am senior enough that I can say, yeah, I don't really feel like writing about that. Or I can say, yeah, I'm going to address that directly. So, for me at least, where I am now, I generally don't have a problem because I am currently the oldest tenured member of US Gamer. Even our editor-in-chief, Kat Bailey, actually started on the site after me. So, yeah, but that's also not to say that people maybe at a bigger site at IGN or GameSpot or somewhere else might not have had an opportunity or may have been pigeonholed in terms of things that they've been allowed to talk or write about. That is sort of the thing I think on that. But for me specifically, yeah, other than the being misrepresented as Evan or some others, I really haven't had problems or many roadblocks in my way that I've known about.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, we would never know sometimes with these things.
And it's also that I haven't, since working at US Gamer, I generally haven't applied elsewhere for other jobs, so I've never sort of run into a situation where I've been shut out of something. I also have a pretty normal name because it's Mike Williams, and the pen name sometimes is MH Williams, which sounds pretty white dude already. So I don't even have a problem on that side, whereas someone like Blessing might have a more of an issue if he wasn't that kind of funny.
Oh yeah, that's true. So maybe we go to the last 2 to 3 questions, and we start with this one. Those are all related, or some of them are related to interviews. You said on Twitter that you said that the value of having a good translator is essential. I think you said you have no idea how key a great translator is for an interview. There's the difference between a good insightful answers and the stuff you can't work around with. So
yeah, so I've had interviews where the translator is not necessarily the kind of translator that can do real-time translation. Like I can muddle through Japanese, but that's not enough to do an interview. But it is enough for me to go, no, I know that his answer was probably much larger than what you just told me in English. And so, especially in terms of communication, there's certain real-time translators who will take the time to fully get across the meaning in both directions. Where, like, I'll ask a question and the translator will sit there and go, well, do you mean, in terms of this word or phrase, do you mean this or this? Or, like, they want to get across the exact meaning of what I'm trying to say and how the person is responding. And I don't want to say exactly... like I don't know their names, but even the company that they work for, where I had those particularly poor translating experiences. But when it's like that, it's like hearing a Japanese developer talk for a couple of sentences and then getting from the translator like a yes, he thinks that's the case. Like I need the full scope of the answer, because generally the way we present our interviews is not just Q&A format. It's we write alongside the answers themselves and make a full, editorial out of it. So I need the full answer so I can be like, well, I'm going to write this up in my own words, and I'm going to quote the developer directly in this part. And the shorter the answer, the less I get, the more difficult that is. And so, like, a proper translator is, they're just wonderful people. And also, I'm on, I was a part of Otakon, which is a East Coast anime convention, for a very long time on their Japanese guest side. So I've also worked with like really, really good real-time translators. And it's just a much better experience overall in terms of having the actual conversation with somebody. And because an interview is a conversation, like if you don't have any connection with your interviewee, you're probably not going to get great answers. And sometimes that's just in being personable. Sometimes that's in the questions that you ask, because you can always tell when you get a question that the interviewee wanted to answer or no one else asked them, because they sort of like brighten up and they get more excited and their answers get a bit thicker, is the best way to put it. And like having a translator is already a barrier. Having a bad translator there is a huge wall. So,
yeah. Maybe related to this topic, since you're a veteran of interviews, from what I can tell, So I will just ask it very directly. How do I come up with good questions?
Research is always the best. Not only do you need to know about the person that you're interviewing and the game or project or whatever that they're working on, it helps a lot to go through their previous interviews, because then you know that the questions that they're always asked, and you don't need to ask that question again.
Exactly.
So like Hideo Kojima has been asked over the course of Death Stranding promo, like, where did this idea come from? You don't need to ask him that question. You can just take that answer that somebody else already asked. Your job is to look in the holes, like look at the questions that he hasn't been asked, or even the things that either you notice, or perhaps also you can go out to Reddit or forums, and if you spend time in, say, the Death Stranding Reddit for a while, eventually you'll come across a question that you know hasn't been answered elsewhere. So, key to getting good answers is having good questions, and the key to getting good questions is research, a lot of research. I don't necessarily think of myself as the best writer, but I do a lot of research into whatever my topic is, so I can report on it accurately and fully.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, let's all hope that I have did my research here on this interview.
Oh, yeah, no, this has been fun.
Great. Yeah, so maybe one final question, a very short one. I realized that you are the GIF or GIF master of Twitter. You use them all the time. So
yes, I do.
So the first question is it GIF or GIF or GIF?
I use GIF. I believe the creator said it's GIF, but I don't care.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's the same for Reset Era. I think somebody clarified that it's Reset Era, and I don't like this.
Yeah, no, I also do Reset Era, and again, as the owners, they can do whatever they want, but I don't care.
They can also be wrong and own it. And what is your favorite GIF of all time?
Of all time, so there's one, like some of it when I do GIFs, they are through Twitter. I sometimes use their little GIF thing, but generally I'll search for them directly, and the ones I like that I'll save. Like, I have an actual GIF folder that all of my stuff is saved to, that I can just pull from if I'm at my PC. Probably my best one is this black dude, where he's sort of dancing and taking off his coat, and it says "fuckery tonight, let me get comfortable."
Okay, I haven't seen that one.
yeah, that's probably my favorite one. I tend to not use my GIFs too much. Like, if I tend to not want to use the same GIF over and over again. Within a short period of time, I'll space it out a couple months. So
I see. And has there been a GIF of 2020 already?
Oh man, I don't even know. Let me look. Let me look at my my directory and see.
You see, like these are the questions nobody asks, and I dare to ask the questions.
I mean, this is actually a pretty good question for me, and that's the kind of like answer that you want when people are like, "Oh, I don't know, I don't know." Damn, that's a good one. Probably my biggest one right now is from The Good Place. The character, I forget his, Jason, and this is when they're in the bad place, and he just jumps in and throws a Molotov cocktail out of nowhere on the ground, and that feels very 2020 to me.
Oh yeah, I can relate to that. Okay, then we're at the end of the interview, and it's time to wrap it up. Where can people find you, and what are you currently working on?
You can find me on Twitter at AutomaticZen, Z-E-N, and you can find me every day at US Gamer. That's usgamer.net. And what am I working on now? Probably more Ghost of Tsushima articles for the next week and a half to 2 weeks. After that, I'll probably be on to another game. I don't know exactly what that game is, but I'm sure there's something out there for August or whatever that I have to cover.
Yeah, can't wait to see what you're working up on next. And for the finale, I decided I always draw these silly and terribly drawn covers of my podcast, of the episode, and they're always related to the episode. And since you're the comic master and basically you're the expert in comics, I decided I'm going to ask you just a quick, brief questions. What my little hero is supposed to look like. Does he wear a tie? Does he wear glasses? Do you want a cape? So you just give me like the few outlines or just very brief things and the powers maybe, and then I will draw it very, very accurately. And you will see it, the final product, in 1 or 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe.
He does wear glasses and a tie. That's key. That's important. That's whenever I go to a show, that's what I wear.
Are this the superhero clothes, or is it his secret persona like Clark Kent?
I'm gonna go with the superhero clothes. I also like the plainclothes hero, like the dude who steps out in just a suit to a fight. You know that guy is going to probably cause some trouble because you don't want that suit to get messed up, which means he's probably got the skills and powers to back it up.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna say glasses and a tie, definitely.
Okay, and anything related to the powers?
I've always been an energy power kind of guy. Big fan of Bishop from the X-Men. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that, like glowing fist dog.
Okay. Oh, I will try to capture the essence of the hero. And do we have a name for it, or is it just the Yumi Industry Hero?
Yumi Industry Hero. I'm just gonna go with that. I don't have a name yet.
Okay, perfect. All right then, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, Mike, for coming onto the show.
Thanks for letting me come.
All right, everyone. See you next episode. Bye.